Week 1 is in the books almost, and there is no waiver wire that's more important than this one that's going to happen right now. These are the 12 players that you should be looking to add on waivers this week. I'm going to go over why you should be adding them using all the reasoning and all the usage from this week's data. J.K. Dobbins, my God, it was so good to see J.K. Dobbins get through a game completely healthy and look even a fraction of his old self. Yes, he got caught on the long run when he ran for 61 yards, and the old J.K. Dobbins, that probably wouldn't have happened. But I'm sure that he can probably get some of that speed back over time. Kamani Vidal was a healthy scratch, so this was only Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins played 11 of the 13 third downs, played all 3 short yardage snaps. He had 3 receptions on 3 targets. If he's going to be a little bit slow, if he's not going to be able to get away from defenders in the way that he used to, then getting those catches, getting those passing down work, that is exactly what we need from J.K. Dobbins to be not necessarily a league winner, but the kind of running back that you can start plenty of weeks through the rest of this year. I'd be quite aggressive trying to add J.K. Dobbins. Isaiah Likely, tight end, was ugly this week. I mean, unless you had Isaiah Likely or Foster Moreau, then you weren't scoring over 12 PPR points this week. They were the only 2 tight ends who did that, just like we all imagined all offseason. As Rich noted in our Discord, Likely had a career-high route participation in games with Mark Andrews healthy. He also had the second highest target game of his career. 26.1 points is an absolute haul, and no doubt won a lot of people weeks if they did have him, but most people didn't have him, and most people didn't start him. There were only 10 tight ends who outperformed that 26 PPR points in the entirety of last year. The Ravens all offseason, they told us that Isaiah Likely was going to stay on the field, that they were going to use a lot of 2 tight end sets, and it looks like they absolutely are. Yes, there's going to be weeks where it's Mark Andrews weeks, but look, the tight end position, it's a mess, and if you waited on tight end late, I'd be quite aggressive going out and getting Isaiah Likely right now. Before we move on to our next player, though, hit that subscribe button. We've got DFS, we've got Best Ball, we've got Dynasty, we've got Redraft, we've got Battle Royale content for Underdog, and of course, we've got waivers and our weekly starts and sits show. We try to cover everything here to help you win. All you've got to do is hit that subscribe button. Bucky Irving, the knock on Rachaad White has always been his inefficiency. You know, this is a running back who was 3rd bottom in rushing EPA last year, 37th in rush yards after contact, 30th in rush yards before contact, 29th in big runs, only had 4 games over 80 rushing yards in his entire career. Bucky Irving goes in and immediately looks like a very effective back. He had 62 rushing yards yesterday, 6.9 yards per carry versus Rachaad White's 2.1. So if this was an offensive line issue that was holding Rachaad White back, how come Bucky Irving goes in and gets 6.9 yards per carry straight off the go? Yes, he doesn't have the goal line work. Yes, Rachaad White is going to see a lot of pass catching because that's what Rachaad White does well. But Bucky Irving, not only does he have contingent value if anything happens to Rachaad White, but it looks like this is going to end up being more of a committee approach than Rachaad White drafters would have liked. We spent the offseason saying Rachaad White was a dynasty sell, Rachaad White was overpriced in redraft, and it looks like that's coming true already. Rashid Shaheed, coming into this season, Rashid Shaheed needed to earn that full-time wide receiver 2 role. Last year, he came off the field a lot. Michael Thomas was still there. This year, the Saints moved on from Michael Thomas. Now you've got Rashid Shaheed barely leaving the field, had the 2nd most wide receiver snaps on the team, 3 receptions for 73 yards and a touchdown. And it shouldn't be lost, but Derek Carr has actually been fairly good over his last few games going back to last season. He averaged 20.3 points per game over his final 3 games last year. Then yesterday went 19 of 23 for 200 yards. Yes, they're not going to get to play the Panthers every week and get such a gimme matchup. But this is a new offense with a new offensive coordinator, and the early signs are good. Tank Bigsby, we have heard so much from the Jags all offseason about how they want Tank Bigsby to be a thing. They don't want Travis Etienne seeing the ball all the time. They don't view him as a workhorse. We've seen for 2 years straight that Travis Etienne cannot hold up and be efficient over the course of an entire season. He starts strong and then fades down the back. They need someone like Tank Bigsby to mix in, to take some of the between the tackles run-ins so that Etienne can stay fresh for those moments where they do need him. We saw yesterday Etienne, he had that really nasty and unfortunate fumble. That turned the game. At that point, the Jags were completely in control. Very next play, Tyreek Hill goes for the long touchdown. So this one, we've got Tank Bigsby, who rushed 12 times for 73 yards. That was the most by anyone in the Jags backfield. Etienne is still going to see the 2-minute work, the goal line work. He's going to see probably more of the pass catching work. But it looks like Bigsby can create a role for himself. And it was only Bigsby being used after Etienne. Dearness Johnson wasn't used at all. So, yeah, I think you should be adding Bigsby, not only in case of an injury to Travis Etienne, but also just for there's going to be weeks when we get into the bye weeks where Bigsby can have standalone value. Alexander Mattison, our cover boy, we tried on this channel to tell people about how Zamir White, he just profiled as the absolute character of a dead zone running back. He was reliant on volume last year when he got in, couldn't find his way into the end zone, only had a 1.9% touchdown rate. And now you've got Alexander Mattison, who comes in, leads the backfield in snaps with 36 to Zamir White's 23, had all 9 of the third down snaps. So those really valuable ones where you're more likely to catch passes. We've always seen Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator with the Raiders, rotate his running backs. We saw this in Chicago. So Zamir White is not going to get the volume, and I'd be very worried about him. It seems like he's only going to be relevant in games where the Raiders are winning. But how often are we going to see the Raiders win when they've got the offense they have? Alexander Mattison, he seems to be the pass catching back, and people didn't want to go near him because of how he was last year with the Vikings, but going completely undrafted, that was undervaluing a guy who we've seen be useful in this league. And going out and having 4 receptions for 43 yards and a touchdown, that's the kind of back who should be rostered in every league. Justice Hill, another situation where the Ravens try to tell us exactly what it would be like, and lo and behold, this is what we get. He said that Justice Hill would have a decent role on the offense, and he had a decent role. Now, the Ravens aren't going to be losing and in negative game scripts like they were to the Chiefs every single week, so there will be games where we see a lot more Derrick Henry. Next week, the Ravens play the Raiders, so expect that one to be more of a Derrick Henry week. But right now, Justice Hill is the clear third down back for the Ravens. You know, we know that's not what Derrick Henry is. And Justice Hill went out there and had 8 targets for 52 receiving yards, only 1 rush for 3 yards. So it is going to be quite high risk when you start him. But there are going to be weeks where we can do that, where we know, okay, well, this looks like a week where the Ravens could be up against it. So let's start Justice Hill in the flex. Let's start him in deeper leagues. He's absolutely worth stashing. Alec Pierce, this is quite a high-risk one, and it might not work out when Josh Downs gets back on the field. As Rich noted in our Discord write-up of all the games reviews that he does every week, Pierce was exactly what he's been for the past 2 years. Runs a lot of routes deep and sees a few targets. It just so happened he reeled in all 3 of them for 125 yards and a touchdown. If you want to join our Discord and get access to Rich's weekly write-ups as well as so much of the premium content you don't get here, hit the join button down below. A.D. Mitchell came really close on bombs. We saw that A.D. Mitchell now, with Josh Downs out, is playing more in the slot, which has pushed Alec Pierce back into the wide receiver rotation set. He's playing on the outside. He's got a limited period of time to make this role his own before Josh Downs comes back, potentially as soon as next week. And then the team's going to have to decide whether they want the promising rookie in A.D. Mitchell playing or whether they want Alec Pierce. But in deeper leagues, I think you've got to go out and add Alec Pierce. I would not be spending a lot on him, but he's well worth an ad. Wan'Dale Robinson. Look, I get it. I understand that the Giants absolutely suck. Daniel Jones got completely booed by his own fans. They know it. We know it. But for fantasy football purposes, Wan'Dale Robinson had 11 targets. It's clearly just Wan'Dale Robinson, Malik Neighbors, and very little else on this offense. Daniel Jones, he went 22 of 42 for 186 yards and 2 interceptions. But you know what? Next week, they face the Washington Commanders, who have a woeful pass defense. We just saw the Bucs absolutely cook them. Last year, they finished 32nd in DVOA. Chris Godwin playing out of the slot went for 8 for 83 and a touchdown. Guess where Wan'Dale Robinson plays? Primarily from the slot. So even if you're only looking at 1 week whilst you're waiting on some of these rookies to see an expanded role on your roster, now's the time to add Wan'Dale, and you can absolutely start him next week. Justin Fields. It wasn't exactly electric from Justin Fields yesterday. I know a lot of people were excited to see him out there, thought that we could see the Justin Fields kind of revenge tour start, but it didn't really come to fruition. Yes, he had a 73% completion rate, which for Justin Fields is excellent. There wasn't much over the middle of the field, though. It was all near the line of scrimmage or deeper shots downfield to the boundaries. 14 carries, 57 yards is good, though. That's what we need from Justin Fields. But we need some touchdowns. 0 touchdowns yesterday. George Pickens was the only wide receiver or pass catcher over 28 yards. And this defense could keep scores low, which is why I've got Justin Fields buried at this point in the video, because I'm just not sure that Justin Fields showed enough that this job is definitely his for the foreseeable future, or that we can believe that this team's going to score high amounts of points every single week. But if Justin Fields is going to start games, there are going to be the blow-up games soon, and I'd like to put him on my bench and at least take more of a longer look at him. Brandin Cooks. Jake Ferguson sounds like he avoided a torn ACL, but there's still going to be tests to determine how long he could miss. And if that happens, it's really going to open up even more targets for what's there already, because the Cowboys' backup tight ends, they're pretty grim. Brandin Cooks seems locked in as the clear wide receiver 2, had 4 receptions, 40 receiving yards, and a touchdown yesterday, led the team in snaps and routes run. And part of that is because CeeDee Lamb's probably a bit rusty, came off not practicing a huge amount through the summer. And of course, they were dominating the Browns. So why would you run CeeDee Lamb out there a huge amount? But Jalen Tolbert doesn't seem good enough to steal Brandin Cooks' job. He seems completely locked in as the wide receiver 2 for the foreseeable future. And there are going to be weeks where you don't want to start Brandin Cooks, but he's probably better than some of the guys that you've already added to your bench. Greg Dortch, Short King Summer rolls on. I think this is a deeper leagues only one. Like, Kyler Murray absolutely loves Greg Dortch, but there aren't going to be a huge amount of weeks where we see Greg Dortch lead the team in receptions and receiving yards. I think there's going to be an acclimation sort of period as Marvin Harrison gets used to the NFL and playing on the Cardinals, and over time, Kyler Murray's going to lean on him more. But in the meantime, if you're in a deeper league where you're playing 4 or 5 wide receivers, then Greg Dortch, he has a role. Yes, he is going to leave the field for 2 wide receiver sets at times because he is a pure slot receiver, but the team love him. There'll be shootout weeks where we know this Cardinals defense is going to put them into high game scripts where they're going to be passing a lot. So I don't mind taking a flyer on Greg Dortch, but not on standard roster leagues. You definitely need to be in deeper ones. Those are your week 2 waivers. If you play Dynasty, make sure you keep an eye out for Rich's Dynasty video coming up later today about Dynasty buys and sells. After this week's action, he's going to give you the values, what you should be looking to trade those players for, and all the reasoning why. We'll be back with our weekly preview on Thursday, telling you all the starts and sits you should consider for this week. Great season coming up. Make sure you hit the subscribe button.